My name is Dmitro, my last name is Sherenbey. I'm a chairman of the 100% Life Foundation, which is the largest foundation in Ukraine as well as in the region, and it is 20 years old. 100% Life Foundation is a phenomenon that will be studied later in the future, because it is a foundation that was formed by people with a fatal disease, people who had to die, people who had no future. And in fact, 20 years ago they were just fighting for tomorrow. They survived, they won, and they are not the only who won. More than 140,000 people today live thanks to this foundation, and this fund is now forming health policy. This fund has been the largest non-governmental financial organization in Ukraine for 5 years in a row. Our foundation has delivered more than 500 technical assistance aircraft to Ukraine over the past 5 years. We delivered medicines, equipment for clinics, test systems, everything that is necessary for the healthcare system. Today, leading international foundations set 100% Life phenomenon as an example of the most effective tool for changing life. But at the beginning of this story, it was always impossible.
Everything that started on February 24 from the morning, well, for me it started at 5:40, it was all impossible. It was very unexpected for us to be completely out of mobile connection, right? Or that there is no gas in the city and we won't be able to do it, and that we will have to do it all on foot. For HIV-positive people, anonymity is a major importance. Anonymity equals security. And after some time, no one asked us, as a charity organization, who the medicines are for, that these are medicines for HIV-positive people. So there was only one message. We need to deliver medicine to a person without which a person cannot live. And in general, to deliver medicines without disclosing the status, without talking about HIV infection at all, well, it was actually impossible, but we managed. Somewhere in the areas where, well, it was impossible to get out of the shelters at all because there was shelling, well, almost all day. And actually, this is the story of one of our social workers who, even before the war, took care and provided social services to his client. She was pregnant, and actually when hostilities began, the woman was about to give birth. While we were at home, we went down to the basement, but then we decided to go to the bomb shelter. There were explosions, there were sirens, it was very scary, because I also got a temperature there. And that's why I gave birth on the 35th week. It was already so much in the bunker. There was no light. It was impossible to feed a child. Did laundry on the street. Had to boil it all on the street, and it was very scary to go out from there. Because when I went for the medicines for the first time, when I went out, a plane was flying. There were people who helped to take me to the hospital under the shelling. 100% Life, an organization which helped me a lot, because they gave me clothes for the child and a lot of things, and so many kind people helped. The main thought was to save the child. Mom fought for her life. She needs to be healthy. This is the most important, and there was peace at last. She worried a lot about how it would all turn out. She really wanted to give birth to a healthy HIV-negative child, and in general, in the conditions of war, it looked like something like impossible. I can say that in March, at the beginning of March, this woman gave birth to a healthy daughter. This woman came to us and we were, well, giving her a baby box. And it was, well, a very big event because it's the birth of a new life during the war. Well, it is very important to do some impossible things that, well, we little people do.
Let's have a small time machine. We'll go 20 years back in the history of Ukraine. We'll wake up in it, in a country where the word AIDS is equal to death. A person who suffers from this disease, a person who, well, he must be burned at a stake, and absolutely everyone hates them. So it is such a national phobia, and you have task before you to persuade people to be tested in order to try to build their lives. It's really an impossible task, but it had to be solved because hundreds of thousands of people were walking with this disease. They were dying, the epidemic was developing. And I'm one of those people who got this diagnosis more than 20 years ago. And I believe that we have successfully managed with this task. We have instilled a culture of taking care of your health. Today, more than 140,000 people are taking antiretroviral therapy, and hundreds of thousands are being tested for HIV. Our main task is not to make people just to take tests. Our task is not to make people just to take pills. Our task is to ensure that they treat health as an important asset that requires self-care. This asset enables us to go as far as possible in life. And this is the culture we instill in society. Taking care of your health is also taking care of those you love. Their safety is your safety too. And this fundamental value lies in the heart of all our programs, to protect and fight for life.
Even before the beginning of a full-scale invasion, we already had the experience of helping people in emergency situations. During the war, everything is impossible. Everything is just everything, even the existence of people. And it turned out that there are people in the communities we work with, people live with HIV/AIDS, who have some concomitant diseases, who are members of the community. They do not have access to basic things, to food. The Pinchuk Foundation came and said, here's the money, your task now is to feed 10,000 people, you have the resources for that. And we did it. It was impossible. It was impossible to find resources in such conditions, but it happened and the help was in time. In time because no one died of hunger. We have a project, a joint project with the World Food Programme, and the main target group will be people living with HIV, people living affected by tuberculosis and all our key populations that we work with, people who are vulnerable to HIV. In this project, they are priority, and in fact the needs of people who are most vulnerable in such emergency situations, who are most in need. For the first time in my memory, in my experience of work with HIV services, it is the first time the needs are really put in the first place in the conditions of humanitarian crisis. We need any help now because there are millions of people who are internally displaced, millions of people who are left without housing, without food, without access to treatment, without meeting their basic needs. And now winter is near. I'm trying to imagine 800,000 people who are already now, without any shelter in the cold, and I'm scared.
I let my heart decide the way when I was young. Deep down,
There are two persons who never said no when everyone refused. And people said, we won't go because there's shooting. We won't go because it's dangerous. And you just picked up the phone and said, Lyosha, it's very important. He said, yes, I'll do it. We'll do it. They took from warehouses that were under fire simply because that food could feed someone else. They evacuated, they helped. They delivered this help to Chernihiv when no one delivered.
О, жесть, просто жесть.
And they died there near Chernihiv, saving people's lives, feeding, evacuating, and risking their lives so that someone else could live. Sometimes we pay an impossible price for this impossibility. the price of our very decent, bright, honest people. And this price is impossible and should not exist, but unfortunately it exists.
They cannot look me in the eye. It's like they're scared of me.
What changed on February 24th? A few important things for any person, organization or foundation. There are always key moments of testing your values, who you are, what you're made of and what you're capable of. I'm very glad that the civilian sector in Ukraine, no matter what danger came and showed their weapons, stood up and went to fight. Our foundation was no exception. Throughout Ukraine, in every city where our foundation is located, all representatives of our organization began to work around the clock so that we ultimately won. The war proved that the name of our foundation is our DNA, and we do not betray our values, and we are ready to fight for them to the end. It is sad and scary that at such an incredible cost, we're proving our fundamental commitment to the fact that life will always be our number one priority, no matter the threat that comes to us. It was difficult in 2014, but, well, there were no such intense battles. My client called me and said that she had come under fire. A missile hit her house and killed her husband. Well, she said some really horrible things. Said she didn't even recognize him at first because he was all burned and black and torn in two. She was on a methadone program and she ran out of meds. She felt sick and bad. Abstinence began and she has a child with her. She was on the verge of a moral breakdown. She was already saying, "Alexei, if you don't promise me that you will take me out, then I will simply go with that child to the roof of the house, some tall house, and throw myself down with her, because I can no longer."
We were hiding. First we were hiding in the corridor, and then in the basement. And the husband went out for bread. Not for bread, really, well, he went to take out the garbage and that's it. Just wrong timing, and the rocket killed him. We couldn't leave for a long time from that city. An organization helped me called 100% Life, and also the organization WAVE. Alexei Kvitkovsky. He always helped us. He helped us in the city when we needed help. I'm now safe with the child, although for a long time it seemed that it was, that this was a dream. God save anyone from experiencing this. It was on the roof, it was just difficult. Well, you can't understand it. It's when you lose, when you're alone and you don't know what will happen next. I just didn't have the strength to keep fighting. Ukraine really needs help, and there are a lot of such people. They do not write about them, do not film them. They are not visible. They are closed, they hide. They're afraid, but there are a lot of them, and they wait and hope. I know that they pray every day, every evening.
It was impossible. It was impossible to leave her there. And already here, we faced with the challenge when we were actually helping people to survive. We were not just saving their health, but we're saving people's lives.
War is scary for me and for others, because real people die because of war. War breaks everything. I saw in the news that my school was bombed. I would like the war to stop.
There's one thing you will never get tired of: the work you love. Of course, you'll be physically tired. You will probably get tired emotionally. But you will always get up with inner strength to go forward. And imagine for a second that you're doing what you love, or you love life. Conceptually, you won't get a moment of fatigue from this process. And when you achieve a result for the sake of those who are dear to you, this is the most important feeling that we experience. Regardless of the way we have passed and the time we've spent, we will always experience the feeling of happiness that something has changed in their lives. We deal with protecting the rights of key communities such as LGBT, and not only, but all key communities in relation to HIV infection. And also apart from that, I was actively engaged in public activities that are not only related to the LGBT sector. I wrote analytical articles about the impact of Russian propaganda on Ukrainian society for mass media.
Российских войск на Украине нет.
What America is officially calling a Russian invasion of Ukraine. This is a Russian invasion, the U.S. says. It has no doubt these are Russian forces roaming the roads here in Ukraine.
In fact, impossible is a word that follows all my social activism and all my social activities. I thought it was impossible when the war in Donbass started, that we would be able to stop the advance of Russian troops, that society would be able to react to this situation in such a way. I thought it was absolutely impossible that Ukraine would make such a furious resistance, that we would see such a unity not only of public society, but of the entire nation, which came to the defense of our country. Until February 24th, I considered my publicity impossible, because I cannot say that I ever hid my sexual orientation, but such openness in this matter is actually another sacrifice I made for the benefit of Ukraine, because we clearly understand that this message is important for many, especially in Western society. Protecting human rights is one of my values in this life, and the only way to protect human rights in Ukraine now is to take up arms and go to the front. Unfortunately, this is the only option the Russians have left us, and it was actually my choice to do so. Gays fight on an equal, together with everyone else, and lesbians too. And we also have openly transgender people who are now on the front lines, on the very front lines, fighting openly, and yet they do not face any discrimination or opposition in the army itself. Therefore, I think it is very important for me, for us, for my organization, as well as for our society as a whole, and for the LGBT community as a whole in a global community.
Ой, у лузі червона калина похилилася, чогось наша славна Україна зажурилася.
The results that we have achieved as a civilian sector over the past 10 years are unique in terms of their concentration, in terms of their scale, in terms of their effectiveness. The means that we used were really extravagant, and it was frightening to many. But we must clearly understand that the goal that we pursued as a civilian sector in each of our areas justified the loss of comfort, convenience and coziness in which we could have lived. The goal should always be more valuable than the conditions in which you are, and the future should force you to go forward. For the past 10 years we've modified the policy in various sectors, modified the financial policy, modified the attitude towards human rights. For 10 years no country in the world has shown such results as Ukraine. And the most important difference, the highlight of this process of change, is the civilian sector, which was the mainspring of it all. Ukrainians do many impossible things, and reforms are those impossible things that we constantly do. Corruption in Ukraine is a key goal of any political process. This is what all politics is for. On the one hand. On the other hand, corruption is a key tool of this policy, not only in the political and electoral process, but also in the managerial and administrative process. And it seems impossible to change the foundation on which a country of 40 million lived for 20 years. This impossibility is not just a difficulty, it's not just a danger. It's when you're a small group of people fighting against a governmental system, and the fight against such a machine looks really impossible. No reform has taken place in Ukraine over the past 15 years without public organization. And not only reforms, Ukraine made all its historical leaps forward under the pressure of civil society. The Orange Revolution and the EU, candidacy for the EU, the army, volunteerism, protection of sovereignty. The state would not have been able to do all of these without civil society. That is, a group of public activists forced the state machine to do the impossible. This is a very motivating story, and this drive, this realization of your mission takes to a backseat the price we all pay. Danger, attacks on your family, that is. There are real threats, physical threats.
Керівник Центру протидії корупції, активіст Віталій Шабунін, заявив, що його будинок підпалили. Пожежа сталася вночі.
Загорілася оселя голови Центру протидії корупції о 4 ранку.
У Рівному невідомі підклали вибуховий пристрій під квартиру матері громадського активіста Віталія Шабуніна.
Я підняв трубку і почув
I picked up the phone and heard shouts that the fire was burning. I was lucky, my family was lucky, that my neighbor works at night and she heard the explosion at 2:30 a.m. Aggression towards public activists. And it seems to me that it is normal and valuable when your neighbor lives well, and he wants his neighbor to live just as well. Donors are part of our success. Without them, this success would not have happened. And this is not just some immeasurable success. In the medical reform, this is thousands of saved lives. The result of each reform is a common result of the people who did it in the field with their hands and the people who gave money for it. And this is a mutual result. Because if we manage to do the impossible in Ukraine, it means that it can be repeated in any other country of the world. And the donor, anyone who wants a result, in other countries will have an example to refer to. It is interesting. It is interesting to do impossible. It's a new challenge every time. This impossible, which was made possible by our and donors' joint efforts, makes it possible all over the world. The impossible stands near the miracle. People admire it, they are surprised that it happened, because they did not believe that it was possible. Our whole life of our foundation and life of every activist in Ukraine and in the world is a story about the impossible, which ultimately is like a miracle. I'm grateful to all donors, all partners and all people who believed in us. believed that we can do the impossible, and therefore all of you are the part of the miracle that you see, and part of this impossible.
Donate to Impossible.
Donate to Impossible.
Donate to the impossible.
Donate to Impossible.
Donate to Impossible.
Donate to Ukraine.